Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to one of our webinars. This is the fourth one in our series. Those of you who have been following us from the start, you'll know that right in the beginning, when Corona struck, we sort of went into the cloud and still tried to reach out to people with great success. We had three webinars. The first one spoke about thinking models, thinking modes, how we're thinking about things, and really sort of challenging people to think differently about things. The second one was all about learn to achieve, learn to excel. We had Dr. Wada, our chairperson, my friend and colleague, that took us through a session explaining more about Ramadan, what it means during this time. And then the third one was a very interesting one as well. We had a guest from South Africa that took us through a session on resilience. And that's where we touched on the theme of ACT in our leadership framework. And tonight, very excited to have Paddy Upton with us. That's going to take us through this fourth webinar in our series of four, talking where our theme is Inspire for Greatness, and he's going to bring some insights to that. Just a reminder, make sure your audio settings are all sorted. You don't have hundreds of other browsers on at the same time. This time we know that everybody has gone digital, so you might end up having some problem with connectivity if that's the case. There's a chat box on your right-hand side. Please chat away as the talk continues during the evening. If you have any questions, the chat is public, okay, so everybody can see what you're chatting. If you have any questions for Paddy, please type the question. He's not going to answer it straight away. We're going to give him airtime to finish his talk. Normally, our webinars last about an hour. And then those of you who want to stay engaged and ask some more questions and have more of a conversation with Paddy, you can then, of course, just stay online. We'll be online for about another half an hour. So please type in your questions, but stay online for the last half an hour. There is one handout that we'll share a little bit later on. I'll tell you more about that when we get to that. So who are we? We Platform for Connected Leadership. Those of you who don't know us, we're a training institute, leadership training institute here in Dubai, registered in Dubai. And amongst the three founders, myself, Marina van Zyl, and Dr. Wada, we believe that everybody has greatness in them, and we work with leaders across various industries to help them to find and discover that inner greatness that ultimately helps them to be better leaders in the organization, but not just for the working environment, also for the social and for the family environment. That's who we are. There we go. Sorry, that wasn't supposed to happen. Theme tonight, Inspiring for Greatness. So as I mentioned when we started, this is the fourth one. We have a leadership framework that we published in Harvard Business Review some time ago. And in this framework, we talk about the key traits for leaders to help them navigate through the 21st century. This is not specific to COVID, but very applicable in this time. It's really focusing on future leadership skills. So it's thinking, learning, acting, and then inspiring the next generation, inspiring your peers, colleagues, and those that you have contact with. And tonight we call it Playing Your Personal A Game. And that's what Paddy is going to take us through. I'll do an official introduction of Paddy just now. Paddy, I'm not sure those of you who know Paddy Upton, he is a high-performance coach. He's an author. He's a speaker and an academic. And he brings over 25 years of experience of working in high-performing teams in business and sport across multiple industries and different cultures spanning 5 continents. But of course, most of us know Paddy for what he's done and what he's achieved on the cricket field. And he's been a head coach for 5 different professional T20 cricket teams in 12 tournaments. And he has also assisted the Indian national team, the cricket team, to win the 2011 ICC Cricket World Cup. I think that's where a lot of you probably know him from. And this was the first time in 28 years that they won this, and also to become world number 1's test team for the first time. Other than that, what really amazed me when I read through Paddy's profile, because I think most people know him from the cricket field, is that Paddy has as degrees from 4 different universities, including 2 master's degrees. And he's also a professor at Deakin University Business and Law Faculty in Melbourne, Australia. And he's also the author of his recent best-selling book called The Barefoot Coach, Life-Changing Insights from Coaching the World's Best Cricketers. And this has been called brilliant and very insightful. So it's one of the best books on management and leadership, and a must for any coach or business leader. And with that, I want to hand over to Paddy. Paddy is going to take us through tonight's session, playing your own personal A game. Paddy, welcome. The other person that you can see in camera there, that's Dr. Wada, our chairperson, who I referred to earlier on. Will be joining throughout the webinar. Paddy's going to take us to the end of the hour. And then after that, we'll take some questions, and we'll also, from our side, pose some questions. Thank you very much, Paddy. All yours.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, my mistake. Just very quickly, a poll that I just very quickly want to run. Those of you who have joined tonight, if you have attended any of our sessions before, just type yes on no, yes on 2, yes on 3. Or if you haven't attended any, just type in there no, just to give us an indication. Sorry for that, Paddy, my mistake, my bad.
All good.
All right, looks like we've got a fairly new crowd tonight. That's great. All right, thank you very much. All right, Paddy, all yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I've got. Okay, thanks very much for that introduction, Steyn, and Dr. Wada. Also good to join you for this conversation this evening. I want to talk a little bit to finding your A game, and briefly, let's just run this poll. I'd just be interested as we kick off and going into this, as Steyn mentioned, I have been involved in cricket, so I'd just like to get a sense of the audience, and if you could just poll here, who's a cricket fan, who follows the game pretty closely. 2, if you're sort of a cricket fan or sort of follow it a bit. 3, if you don't really like cricket, don't follow it. And 4, if you really don't know cricket. So we'll just be interested to hear a little bit about the audience, so I can tailor my conversation to meet your listening as best possible. Okay, so quite a few cricket fans, most of us, but there's some people who don't really like it and don't really know it. So that's absolutely fine. You don't need to know cricket or necessarily like it. I will make reference to 1 or 2 cricket stories, but I won't get too technical or strategic. So they're just anecdotes to illustrate points. So I'll make sure I talk into that listening. Thanks for that. So maybe just as just some brief context to give you something of an example of my leadership approach. And rather than tell you about it, I'll tell an anecdote. So as Steyn mentioned, I had been with the Indian cricket team for 3 years, from 2008 to 2011. And I spent that time in the role supporting head coach Gary Kirsten, and my role as the strategic leadership coach, number 1, and the other cap I was wearing was the mental conditioning coach. And sometime later, in fact, 2 years later, in 2013, the Indian Premier League, which is one of probably the richest and most watched sports leagues in the world. It happens in India for 2 months. In fact, it's on the go right at the moment. Most of us will probably know that, just around the corner from probably where you're listening in from, if you're in the Dubai or UAE region. So this particular team, Rajasthan Royals, they won the inaugural IPL, and then they spent the next 4 years at the bottom of the log. And one of the main reasons for them being the bottom of the log, each team was given about $13 million to go into an auction to buy players. But the owners of this particular team gave the team only half of that, about $6.5 million to go into the auction with. And the owners kept the other $6.5 million to run the franchise. So going into that auction, Rajasthan Royals were just not competitive. They were not able to bid for and buy the big ticket players. They had to employ a strategy of finding and unearthing young talent that came cheap. So that effectively they went into every season as the underdogs, particularly on paper. So they'd earned their position at the bottom of the log. So Rahul Dravid, who I'd worked with, was a well-known Indian cricketer. I'd worked with him during my tenure with the Indian cricket team. And Rahul phoned me and said, "Paddy, I know you've got very different thinking about coaching, and I've spent a lot of time coaching coaches." And he said, "Why don't you come and actually do the thing that you've been coaching coaches to do?" Now, Most importantly here in the story is I had never coached a cricket team in my life. I had never planned to be a cricket coach. It was never part of my career move. So this came completely out of the blue, and on paper and by rights, I should never have been coaching a professional cricket team, certainly not at that level with zero experience. Anyway, I got into the final four on the interview, and there was 3 proper cricket coaches and myself as the 4th person. And in the interview, there were 7 interviewers, and one of them who was in fact Clive Woodward, who was the 2003 head coach of the England World Cup rugby winning rugby team. And Clive said to me, "So Paddy, I believe you're not actually a cricket coach," which, by the way, is not a great question when you're sitting in an interview for a cricket coach job to get. And I said, "Yes, you're right. I've never actually coached a cricket team before." And he asked me a very good question. He said, "So you're obviously going to get in the expertise that you don't have. So you're going to get a batting coach and a bowling coach and maybe a fielding coach. And I'm interested, these coaches are going to all be senior to you in terms of experience and in the cricket coaching world." The reality is anyone who was coaching cricket in the world was senior to me in terms of experience. And he said, "But now for this 8 weeks, you're going to be leading these people who are effectively your seniors. And do you see a problem in that dynamic of leading people who are far more experienced than yourself? And if so, how will you manage that dynamic?" And my answer to him was, there won't be a problem. Because if you offer me the job, my prerequisite before accepting is I want no batting coach, no bowling coach, no fielding coach, and no fitness trainer. To which there was dead silence in this interview panel of 7. And they sort of looked at each other, and one of the Indian owners leaned forward and said, "What do you mean?" And my answer to him was, "You're going to give me 25 cricketers who come from 25 different teams. This year alone, they play under 25 different coaches, each with their own idea of how to play T20 cricket. They come from 5 different countries, and between them, they'll have collectively over 1,000 games of T20 experience. That's the expertise I'm going to use to run the entire campaign." So really what I was going to do is I was going to harness the collective intelligence of that team. I ended up getting the job. I think one of the main reasons I got the job was that I can imagine the chief accountant sitting in that interview, and as I was going through it, and he was doing the sums, going, "No batting coach, no bowling coach, no fielding coach, no fitness trainer. That saves on 4 salaries. Give that guy from Cape Town the job." And because he's not even a proper cricket coach, we don't even have to pay him a proper salary. It was a true story. So I ended up getting the job. And for example, we did things like all meetings. I had players talking more. I arrived at meetings not with answers, but I arrived with questions. And I had the players bringing and populating those meetings with their knowledge. All training sessions were optional, that I left it up to the players to decide, do you need to practice, or is there more value in staying at home and resting? Because these guys have very busy annual schedules. And if you do come to practice, I need you to tell me what part of your game you're going to work on. When almost every other professional sport in the world, the coach arrives at training having already decided what the team and the players are going to do. I believe that's fundamentally flawed for a coach to be telling a professional athlete what they need to be doing. I believe it needs to be the other way around. Team talks, players did most of the talking. They decided the dress code. Even if a player developed a technical flaw in their game, rather than me trying to fix it, and I didn't have the knowledge or ability to actually fix it, I would ask them, which one of your teammates, get 2 or 3 of your teammates, and let's have a conversation about that technical flaw. Or maybe you want to get on a phone to a coach somewhere else in the world who knows your game better than anybody else. The answer to your technical flaw exists, and we will just go and find it out there. So that's just a couple of examples. Out of interest, that team in that year, in the first year with this team that had been bottom of the log for 4 years with half the salary cap, a bunch of youngsters, we had some very different, very innovative strategies that came from the playing group. In that year, we still, in fact, 7 years later, we hold the longest ever winning record for a team at home. We won 13 out of 13 games at our home venue. We went on to the IPL finals that year, and we also went on to the Champions League, which is similar to the Champions League in soccer, where the best T20 team from each country around the world comes together, and we went unbeaten all the way through to the finals. And that was without any new players, without any coaches, just with player expertise. So that's just illustrating I guess, my belief and my approach around leadership in the knowledge era, that we need to be harnessing the collective intelligence of the group. However, we moved into 2020. I was very excited. I was calling it 20 All of us had our plans. I'm sure each one of you did. And all of a sudden, boom, I use a sporting analogy. What happened to us is like an athlete moving into one of the best seasons of their career. They're fully prepared, they're fit, they're ready, they're on top of their game, they've got big plans, and then suddenly they sustain a career-limiting injury. And like probably what happened with many of us around COVID, that athlete says they never saw the injury coming. When it happened, they didn't know if they were going to come back, when they were going to come back. If they did come back, would they come back and still be as good as they were? And it's a really traumatic period that an athlete would go through, and I'm sure many of us did personally and within our organizations. And for me, I also went for, I'll go back, I not only business-wise, like many of us, it took a big knock. In fact, in the first week of lockdown in South Africa, my father-in-law, who I was very close to, he was one of the first people to be diagnosed COVID positive, and he was the first person in the Western Cape, unfortunately, to be the first statistic as a person who died from COVID. And my mother-in-law, we needed to nurse her through not really knowing what we're doing, because this was in March. And as I said, he was probably the first case in the Western Cape. So I certainly had the carpet pulled out from underneath me from a professional and very much a personal perspective. And like that athlete, I needed to pick myself up. And the question I asked professionally was, what is the most important requirement for individuals and organizations as they navigate their way through and beyond lockdown? Is there a common requirement? And this was a long investigation that I took. What it turned up was that everyone was having such diverse experiences. Some people were loving the lockdown experience. Some people were really struggling. Some people were loving it from a business front, but really struggling personally with the homeschooling and being locked indoors and whatever was going on domestically. Some people really hated it from a work perspective, being at home with kids, with kids in the background and trying to do it, but they really connected with their family and thoroughly enjoyed it. So there were so many diverse experiences. And the question I continued to ask is there a common requirement amongst these diverse experiences? And maybe just to quickly check in here, I just wonder how your lockdown experience was. And if you could just pop in there and just, what do you resonate most with? Did you mostly love the experience? One, did you experience more joy than struggle, sort of personally and professionally? Or were you three, a bit more struggle than enjoyment? I certainly was in group 3, maybe even bordering on group 4 for the first month. Or did you find it mostly a struggle? And talking about sort of the bulk of the lockdown period. Okay, so we've got a bit of a diversity there. A couple of people really loved it. The majority more joy than struggle, but obviously some struggle in that group 2, and in the third group, more struggle than enjoyment. All right, I'll probably fit it in with that group, that third group there. Okay, thanks very much for that. So interestingly, I was coaching a few professional athletes, helping them navigate their way through this. And one of the conversations I found myself unconsciously having was with these athletes who were talking about, it's probably more important now than ever before that these athletes really bring their A game to this experience. And it wasn't just their A game to their sport when they get back, but their A game to life. They needed to train at home. They needed to have eating disciplines, to somehow figure a way to stay fit, even when they never knew when they were going to come back. They weren't able to go to gyms. Many of them weren't able to get outdoors. So they were needing to create and find a new A game. And it was interesting. I was having a conversation, it was actually with Faf du Plessis, who was the ex-South African cricket captain, a very intelligent individual, thinking cricketer, been involved in the international level for nearly 10 years. And I said to him, Faf, out of interest, what do you mean by your A game? Can you tell me, or if you were to tell some other sort of the average person in the street, what are the boxes you need to tick, or the core components that make up your A game? What are they? And he sort of wasn't able to come up with an answer. He said, give me a little bit of time, I'll get back to you. And to cut a long story short, I ended up contacting 15 athletes who all participated at the international level of the game from 5 different sports, and all of them with more than 10 years experience. And I picked athletes who, for me, were intelligent or cerebral or thinking athletes, and I asked them the same question. And fascinatingly, none of them were able to give a comprehensive answer. None of the 15 were able to agree with any of the others what an A game actually is. Now, the obvious thing we do in 2020 is then we go and Google, so which I did, and I said, okay, Google, can you tell me what the core components are of an A game? And fascinatingly, you can try it for yourself. Google doesn't have an answer. And that's when I realized that this is a concept that we talk about in sport, but we actually don't know what we're talking about. And that really set me on a trail to go and find out, can I, with my 20 years of experience of working with professional athletes from a number of different sports around the world and in business, can I come up with a generic framework or skeleton that makes up an A game? And my answer to you here is yes. It took me 2 months to really interrogate that, come up with a model that I was interested in. I've been taking it out for a spin in businesses now, and I do it in a 90-minute talk that I'm going to briefly touch on now straight after this. And I also delivered in a 3-week, sort of a 6-hour workshop experience. And so far, it's standing the test of time. That the 6 parts of the A game I'm going to talk you through now, they're relevant for everybody. I'm interested to learn differently, but I believe we can't move forward without any of these 6 parts in place. If you're missing one of those parts, you've got a hole in your boat or chink in the armor. But certainly each one of you individually may want to add additional pieces to your A game. And even the 6 pieces I talk through now, each one of us will have very different content, but those ingredients, I would say, are relevant for everyone. So I'm going to talk you through that. What I came up with is find your A game, because at the moment, if we're going to end up at the front of the curve with those individuals or organizations who end up thriving through and beyond this period, one thing that's going to be consistent with those people at the front, other than the lucky few or the well-resourced few, is those people who are able to bring their A game to most of what they do on most days. This is not about finding perfection. The rest who end up just treading water, waiting for things to change, hoping for things to change, waiting for somebody to come and rescue them, those people, the longer we stay in this holding pattern, well, treading water is not really getting us anywhere. We need to be on our A game with clarity and direction, actually swimming into the future as opposed to treading water, metaphorically. So I'm going to talk through the 6 parts of the A game. The first bit is the foundation of our A game. Now, this is what I'm going to talk through is common sense stuff. We all know these things, but I'm going to invite you to look at it in a little bit more detail, under a bit more of a stronger magnifying glass than what you've potentially looked at these elements of your life before, because I believe going forward, they're going to be more important than what they've ever been before for the majority of us. So the first piece is, and this most shallow piece of our foundation, and probably the easiest and one of the most important, is we need to be playing to our strengths. Our success, both individually and as an organization going forwards, is going to be built upon our strengths, as it has in the past, but I think more so in the future. One of the things that is common to the best athletes and the most successful people in music and the arts and business is that they do what they're very good at. They play to their birth talents the majority of the time. We all know that. One of my favorite stories, just to illustrate the point, when Gary Kirsten and myself joined the Indian team as coaches in 2008, interestingly, our first assignment was a 3-match test series in India against our home country, South Africa. And there was this individual on the screen. His name is Virender Sehwag. We call him Viru. And Viru was in and out of he wasn't a regular in the Indian test team. He was an opening batsman. And one of the reasons why he wasn't a regular was he had a flaw in his game when the bowler bowled the fast bowlers bowled short, fast pitch ball that bounced up at the height of his head. He would automatically play at that ball. So it was an impulsive or reflexive attacking stroke. And the thing with playing an attacking stroke against the ball aimed at your head, it's a very high risk, high return stroke. You can't continually do it and not eventually at some point you're going to lose your wicket. All oppositions knew this fundamental flaw in his game and they all targeted that. In Test cricket, you're allowed to bowl 2 of your 6 balls in every over. You're allowed to direct them at the head. And we knew South Africa had 4 of the best fast bowlers in the world at the time, and they would bowl their regulation 2 bouncers per over at Viru with a particular field place there with a deep fine leg, deep square leg, for those who know cricket. By having those 2 fielders there specifically for that shot, it meant they had to take a fielder from somewhere else in the field, and it would have been from the covers, and that was the area of Viru's strength. So when the ball was pitched more fuller to him, he would be able to attack it at will. And Gary Kirsten said to him, Viru, why don't you duck under the bouncer? And the other 4 balls that are pitched up, that's playing to your strength, and you can attack those balls. Sehwag's answer, which had been that for his entire career, was if I duck under it, they'll keep bowling it. But I think if I can attack them and get on top of them, they will stop bowling that ball and just bowl it full to me. Gary laughed and said, Viru, that's hasn't happened in your career, and it's never going to happen. Bowlers will continue targeting that weakness. To his credit, Viru said, okay, let's try. It took him about 12 hours over a 5-day period to unlearn the habit of reflexively playing that ball and then relearn a new habit of just ducking. As soon as it needed to be a reflexive or a programmed impulsive move, because the bowler's bowling at 150 kilometers an hour over a 20-yard distance. You cannot decide to either duck or play a shot. It's just pre-programmed. It's an impulse, instinctive. He did that in the first test match when Viru went out to bat. South Africans bowled their 2 bouncers and over, every over for 90 overs of the day, with their 2 fielders in place, waiting for Viru to make the mistake, which he never did. He went on to score an individual total of 319 not out in that game, one of the highest scores by an Indian cricketer in Test cricket. And it wasn't a once-off. Sorry, let me just go back. It wasn't a once-off. He went on to be a regular in the Indian Test team for the next 5 or 6 years. And at the end of that year, he went on and he was announced the International Test Batsman of the Year. And he did that not by fixing a weakness, but by cutting it out and playing to his strengths. So going forward, I know everyone listening here knows that how important it is to play to our strengths, but can we play to our strengths even 5% more going forwards than what we've ever done before? Because that is going to be one of the most strongest foundations of our success. And not just individually, can we get our teams collectively playing to their strengths even more than what they've done before? The second piece, slightly deeper, slightly less tangible, and that's why it's a bit deeper down, is values. And again, I'm not going to patronize people here by giving you a speech about values and the importance of values. We know the importance of values. But what I am going to invite you is to look maybe slightly differently or slightly more acutely at your values than what you potentially have done before. Now, pre-COVID, there were a number of values that were rewarded, that were sought after, and that achieved rewards. So values such as materialism, as profit, win at all costs, fame. I wonder if I got slides here. No, sorry, I'm just going to go back. Fame, status, power. Those values were rewarded to a large degree pre-COVID. But the thing about those values is they're all self-oriented. They're about me. And I would charge that going forwards, values that are self-oriented are going to be shakier foundation blocks of success going into post-COVID times. I won't get too technical around cricket with the story here because there are some people who don't know or aren't interested. But this is a photograph from a television camera of a cricketer with a piece of sandpaper in his hand. Cricket people will know the story. 2 years ago, the Australian national cricket team had achieved world dominance. They were the #1 test team in the world for a long period of time. They were the World Cup champions from 2015. And because they were doing so well, they had slipped into a win at all costs habits. That was the language that happened in the team. And many in the cricket world felt the Australian team were really crossing the line of what was acceptable and unacceptable. But as happens and research tells us in very successful teams and very successful individuals, they're very reticent to actually self-audit and get some feedback. Because, of course, when you're on top of the world, you're not that open to feedback. And when things are going well, why change things? It was predictable that the Australian cricket team's win at all costs behavior that was escalating at some stage was going to be their undoing, which happened in 2018 in a test series against South Africa in Cape Town, my home city where I'm talking from now, where the Australian team was being dominated by the South African batsmen. And there's a thing that happens in cricket is you get a ball to reverse swing, which just means it behaves very unpredictably in the air when the bowler bowls it. It's a very difficult ball to navigate as a batting team. And the Australians knew if we get the ball to reverse swing, we might be able to get some of the advantage back from the South African team. In order to get the ball to reverse swing, one half of it needs to be very damaged in comparison to the other half, which seldom happens naturally. One way to do it is to artificially damage one side of the ball, which is illegal in the game of cricket. Desperate, using their win at all costs attitude during a break in the tea interval, one of the senior players in Australia went to a young player who just made the team and effectively bullied or coerced him into taking this piece of sandpaper onto the field and said, I want you to sandpaper the ball. Interestingly, the young player wasn't firmly entrenched in the team. He just wanted to do anything he could to be accepted and play his part in helping his team win. And he certainly wasn't in any position to say no to a very senior international player when he was asked to do something. So he said yes. The bully did the bullying or the coercing, and Captain Stephen Smith, he was in the change room, he witnessed the conversation, and he did nothing about it. He didn't step in, he didn't contribute, he just observed it. When they were caught on the television camera and it was all exposed, the consequence of that was that the youngster was banned for 9 months from playing for Australia. Since then, somebody else has entrenched themselves in the team. That youngster's international career is all but over. The bully was banned from holding any position of leadership in Australian cricket for life, and he was banned for a year. And this is Captain Steve Smith in his interview. He was banned from captaincy for 2 years and banned from playing cricket for a year. The cost to Stephen Smith personally, just for not intervening in something going wrong, was the equivalent, well, it was $5 million Australian dollars, or $3.5 million US dollars was loss in earnings for that 1 year, just because he didn't step in and stop something wrong happening. So just a great example there of a bully, of someone being bullied, and of someone sitting by and observing something wrong happening, but not stepping in and doing anything. And that was all driven by a win at all costs attitude. So my question is, are some values actually better than others? And is this a time to revisit, not just personally, but some of our company values? And I would hazard a guess that yes, there are some values that are actually going to be more rewarded and better building blocks of success going forward. Those that are self-oriented, and here I've got a photograph of Man of Player, the series, in 3 different World Cup tournaments, rugby and 2 cricket tournaments. I won't even mention their names. Nobody remembers the man of the series. Everybody remembers, who followed that sport, the team that won the World Cup. And going forward, I would charge that values that are going to be most valuable are those that are are other-oriented, that are serve other people ahead of ourselves, or a worthy cause that is greater than ourselves. So things like teamwork, things like collaboration, integrity. We've all heard words in like customer service. We all know that. But customer service going forward is probably going to be gain more traction and retain us more business and gain us more business than buoyant pre-COVID times. Things like employee engagement internally. We all know the importance of that. But going forward, I think it's going to be even more important that we execute more accurately on things like employee engagement. So just to revisit personal and company values and make sure that we're executing on them more accurately, and they are values that add value to other people and not just to ourselves. One of my favorite stories, probably not many of us will recognize this person. His name's Bobby Jones, a golfer from the early 1920s. And why the hell am I going back nearly 100 years? Well, I'll tell you why. Bobby Jones was playing at the biggest golf tournament in the world at the time, the US Open of Golf in the 1920s. It was finals day of this tournament. Bobby Jones went to address a ball that was lying in the rough, and as he put his club down, He just touched a blade of grass that caused the ball to move ever so slightly. Bobby Jones stepped back and he said to the course marshal, he said, when I addressed the ball, I caused it to move. The marshal was watching and saw nothing. He consulted other marshals. They actually consulted some of the spectators nearby, and they came back to Bobby Jones eventually with a ruling and said, none of us saw the ball move. That's how minusculely the ball actually moved. And they said to Bobby Jones, it's your call. And Bobby said, I know I caused the ball to move, so I'm calling a shot upon myself. At the end of that day, on US Open Golf Finals Day, Bobby Jones lost the final by 1 stroke, and that was the stroke he called upon himself. Nearly 100 years later, still the highest award that can be presented by the United States Professional Golfers Association is the Bobby Jones Award for Sportsmanship. And the thing here is, had the Australian team's win at all costs sandpapering the cricket ball strategy worked perfectly, they would have gained advantage for no more than 2 hours, and it would not have guaranteed them winning the test match that spans 5 days. So maximum benefit would have been for 2 hours, and they would have needed to continue then sandpapering the next ball. The consequence was significant and long-lasting. For Cameron Bancroft is still not back. Stephen Smith, over 2 years later, has still not been given the captaincy back. And Australian cricket suffered severely, and it cost them dearly with sponsorships. In comparison, so when we do something wrong and unethical, very often the gain is very, very short-term, and we need to continue doing that to keep the gain. But doing the right thing, sometimes we don't get the short-term gain, just like Bobby Jones experienced. However, it almost always has medium to long-term significant advantage by doing the right thing and following the right value system. As Albert Einstein said, it's not politically or appropriate. It's quite sexist, but I've chosen to use the same quote that he said: try not become a man or a person of success, but rather try and become a person of value. And I think that's going to be more important and come under a microscope, more so in post-COVID times. The next piece is, and it's for a reason, it's the deepest piece of our foundation. The furthest down, the most difficult to get to, is purpose. Now, again, I know I've been in the coaching game for over 25 years. I've done a lot of work myself around trying to make my own purpose explicit. I can't tell you what my purpose is. It's very difficult to actually put it into words and make it explicit. One of the reasons being is our purpose doesn't sit within our prefrontal cortex or our thinking brain where language sits. It sits somewhere much deeper in our primal or limbic brain, and that brain that really drives our behavior. And you might, anyone who's watched Simon Sinek's talk, How Great Leaders Inspire Action, I think there's over 40 million views of it, and he talks about how important it is to find our why. Our purpose, our why, it's very much the same thing, and Sinek talks about how it's very difficult to make it explicit. And yet, if we're able to plug into our purpose, we're able to find motivation, inspiration, grit, determination. Those things naturally flow when we're plugged into our purpose. Viktor Frankl talks about it in his Man's Search for Meaning, how if we've got purpose, we're able to really navigate any obstacle that's put in front of us. Before I get into this, so in fact, let's jump into the poll. I'd just be interested here just to check my assumption. If you could just fill in here, are you clear on your purpose? Could you tell me what it is now in 1 or 2 sentences and really accurately? Do you sort of know your purpose? 2 or 3, you don't know your purpose, or 4, never really thought about it? Having dealt with it for a long time, I said I fit into category number 2. I sort of know it, but I really struggle to make it explicit. And for a long time, I was in category 3. So a couple of us awesome are able to make their purpose explicit and have done the work. The majority in sort of know it, and 1 or 2 don't know. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So purpose is pretty difficult to find, but as I said, it's that one of the questions that's worth asking for those who scored 2, 3, and 4, that if you believe them, you might have been born with the talents that you were given, and if there was a reason that you were given those talents and a reason you're given the opportunities that you've been given in life, what might that reason be? And I'll offer you a fairly simple life hack here. I'll just go back, sorry. Is one easy way for those, particularly in who answered 3 and 4, to find your purpose is if you play to your strengths, which is the gifts you were given at birth, whether they were God-given gifts, depending on your belief system, or they were just genetic gifts. If you play to your strengths, which is that first layer of our foundations of our A game, and you use your strengths to serve others or a cause greater than yourself, guess what? You're probably very, very close to being in purpose. And when we're in purpose, as I said, when we're in the flow or the rhythm of our life, it tends to work with the rhythm of the greater life and universe out there, and we're able to move around and navigate obstacles. It's easy to get up in the morning, and life really just becomes easy when we're in purpose. So very valuable, and going through the more difficulties and challenges that we've gone through and we're potentially going to find ourselves going through forward, the closer we can to get into purpose, the easier it is to navigate through and beyond the COVID times. So that's the foundation. Once we've got the foundation in place, and you may well want to add to those foundations, but I believe those 3 are probably the 3 of the most important aspects of our A game. In advancing, the first thing is to look long-term in terms of planning. And I'm certainly not going to suggest that we figure out in 3 or 5 or 10 years' time where we're going to be, what our life's going to look like, because the future is pretty uncertain at the moment. However, there is one aspect of our long-term planning that we really do have. I'm just going to go forward to that slide there, that we really do have control over. And I'll tell it through an anecdote. This cricketer here is a young Sachin Tendulkar, Indian cricketer who played international cricket for a consecutive 23 years. I don't think there's any other athlete in any sport, any time in history, that's remained at the international level, at the top of the international level for 23 consecutive years. I was lucky to work with Sachin when I was with the Indian team in his 18th to his 21st year of international cricket. So he had an incredible amount of experience. During the 2011 World Cup, we were in a team meeting, and one of the youngsters said to him, "Sachin, what is some of the most significant moments or experiences in your career?" And at the time, his career had been 21 years old. And he said, well, it was when I played my first test, when I came back from my first test tour with the Indian team at the age of 16. And I thought, well, that's pretty obvious. For any 16-year-old to be playing for a country, that's got to be one of the most significant milestones. But his answer took everyone, including me, by surprise. He said, it wasn't playing for my country at 16. It was when I came home and I rejoined my club team at under 16 level. And one of my best friends came to me and said, "Sachin, can I speak openly? And I speak on behalf of your friends." And Sachin told the story how his 16-year-old friend said to him, "We all recognize that you're a better cricketer than us. But since you've been selected to represent our country, you're acting as if you're a more important person than us. And we don't like that." And Sachin said, as a 16-year-old, that's when I realized that who I am as a cricketer and the results I achieve in the cricket field is different to who I am as a person. And I need to work equally, but differently on being a good cricketer as I do need to be working on being a good person. He went on to say that when he spoke to his father about it, what his father told him that he still carries to this day was his father said, your results in the field will go up and down. And when they go up, people will like you. And when you perform badly and you cause a team to lose, people will criticize you. But the impact you have on them as a person will be remembered for life. So the question I ask you on the long-term planning is, how do you one day want to be remembered as a person? Maybe one day when you retire from your job, or maybe when you're lying on your deathbed one day, or at your funeral. What do you want people to say about you as a person? And not just people, what do you want your colleagues to say? What do you want your competitors, your opponents to say about you? And your family, what about your friends? What is the state of health you'd like to be in? All of these are very controllable. The legacy that you're going to leave in terms of your character is sculpted each and every day, and it is already underway the sculpting of the legacy you're going to leave as a person. Every decision you make, every choice you make, everything you say, every interaction you have with a person is metaphorically like just one little chip at the stone of your character legacy. And each chip might seem completely inconsequential, but it's over a long period of time that each and every chip is going to shape what one day the legacy of your character legacy is going to be. And the question is, what do you want it to be? And are you intentionally living into that character legacy today? Again, I think going forwards in post-COVID times, who we are being as people and our character is going to really count more than ever before. We all know that people like doing business with people they like and trust. And so being likable and trustworthy is going to count even more going forwards. The next piece, we start now moving to more short-term and broad-based looking at our habits. These are the little things that count each and every day. And I love telling stories about this rather than getting too academic about it. I spoke about in 2013, my first ever head coaching job with this young Rajasthan Royals team that ended up doing really well. I'm going to share a little, probably our key strategy of how we did it. So briefly in T20 cricket, which only lasts an hour and a half per innings, 3 hours for a full game. There's only 20 overs, so it's very high impact cricket. And the statisticians still to this day say that teams that win T20 cricket matches most consistently are the teams that hit more 4s and 6s. Those are the big shots that are always shown on the highlights reel. The way to stop people hitting 4s and 6s is to get their 4 and 6 hitting batsmen out. So I looked at our batsmen, I put our top 6 best batsmen, and I looked at their 4 and 6 hitting data compared to all the other 7 teams in the league, and we rated 8th out of 8th. When I took our bowlers and looked at their ability to get the opposition top 6 batsmen out, who were the big 6 hitters, we ranked 8th out of 8. So we were just not competitive when it came to traditional T20 stats, and it was very obvious why this team had spent 4 years at the bottom of the log. However, that wasn't good enough just to sit back and say, okay, well, I'm going to use that as a new coach. I'm going to use that as an excuse. We needed to look at, well, how do we do this thing differently? And one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, was we look to hire really young, high potential players, and the word young really stood out. So it means we're young, we're fit, we're youthful. Can we use the youthfulness? And we decided to make 1s and 2s really, really important. We valued scoring ourselves when we were batting. Every 1 and 2 we highly prized, and every 1 or 2 we could cut down when the opposition were batting, we really rewarded that and prized it. Still to this day, there is nowhere in T20 stats that says 1s and 2s are important, but we chose to make them important. At the end of the seasons, as I said to you, that season was 13 out of 13 home wins. We made the IPL finals and went unbeaten to the Champions League finals. There was about 21 or 22 games, I forget now. On average, there was the runs scored in those, average of the runs scored in those games, those 21 or 22 games, was 160 runs per innings. Opposition, on average, scored 18 runs more than us per game in 4s and 6s. However, when we looked at 1s and 2s, we scored on average 21 runs per game in 1s, more than opposition in 1s and 2s. And that's really what we built our success. So my question to you is, in your own life, in your business life, where are those 1s and 2s that you can be capitalizing on? And importantly, they're available every single day. Those little 1s and 2s, the small ones, the small little habits. And where might we be ignoring those, like cricketers do, by chasing the 4s and 6s, the big deals, the things that are celebrated publicly, that are highly rewarded, and where are we missing the 1s and 2s that we could be accumulating along the way? For the cricket people here, if you want to score a century in Test cricket, which is probably one of the biggest milestones that anyone can achieve in the game of cricket, almost every century comprises more 1s and 2s than it does 4s and 6s. They don't make the highlights package. They're not spoken about afterwards. However, they add up to scoring 100. Where are your 1s and 2s? So in the 6-hour or 3-week series that or workshop that I take people through, we go into detail when we look at all the different areas of people's lives: career, finance, health, family, friends, spirituality, home improvements, hobbies, whatever it might be. And we apply a very simple investment versus return equation. The return in each one of those individual areas of our life right now is around looking at what is the current quality of experience I'm having in any of those areas in our life. And if we want to have an improved or an increased quality of experience, what we need to do is very simply make some slight adjustments to our investments in those areas. And the investments generally is either in time or in habits. And if we make some fine adjustments to how we're spending, and nobody has enough time to invest in all of the areas of the life. So it's important that we use our time smartly and we engage in smart habits. And the reality at the moment, one of the reasons why there's so much opportunity to move ahead of our peers, who were our previous neck and neck rivals, is that more people than not during this lockdown period have found themselves slipping into bad habits. Lack of motivation, bad eating habits, lack of exercise. So they're just arriving in the workplace now a little bit off their best, which if you've got collectively a team, a sports team or an organization where more people than not are just off their best, it's going to impact performance. So the final piece that we talk to is executing. And if I use a sporting analogy, most athletes, or certainly professional athletes, they have the foundations of their A game in place. They've done the preparation, they've done the planning, they've done all of their practicing, they've got their data, they've had good sleep, they've eaten well, they've got all their equipment in order, and they arrive on game day with their A game. But the reality is they don't always execute on it. And the reason being is this is really where the mind kicks in, and people say the mind is so important, and certainly in sports it's more important probably than any other component because it's the sharp end of performance. And to a large degree, we're finding even this now in the business context, that people's focus, their mental focus, their endurance, their resilience has taken a knock, particularly during a number of people during the lockdown period. So focus now is and execution is more difficult than previously. And again, the people who are able to focus and execute more accurately, the opportunity of going ahead now is greater than probably what it's ever been before in a number of industries and organizations. Focus, however, is not about doing something. It's actually more about removing the obstacles or distractions to our success or to our focus. And if I were to use an analogy, it's almost, I'll use the analogy of a vegetable garden. In order to grow a really good vegetable garden, you need to have the soil a really good and healthy soil in place. You've got to obviously get the right healthy seeds and put the seeds in to the foundation. And as those seeds grow, what we need to do is really just create a healthy environment. So we're fertilizing the soil, we're watering, and those plants will then naturally grow to their full potential. And some tomato plants might grow that big and some might grow that big. It's the same with us people. If we've got the foundations of our A game and we've got the long-term planning, we've got clarity around our character, we've assessed all the different areas of our life, and we've got some stability and some go forward and mostly healthy habits, in order to wake up each day or most days and execute on our A game for most of the day on most days. As I said, probably 80% of the time we need to be getting it 80% right. That's probably a good result realistically at the moment. We need to be removing the obstacles and distractions to our execution of our A game. And as one of the things Steyn mentioned earlier, I have spent 20 years as a mental coach working with a number of different athletes from a number of different sports around the world, helping them navigate the obstacles to their success. And I'll briefly talk you through, and hopefully you can find one little area here as I talk sort of in the next 5-6 minutes through this last piece here, and see if you can pick one area where you can get your obstacles or distractions maybe 3 or 4% removed, from what they currently are. So the 3 places that we find obstacles arising is either in the past, present, or the future. And it's very simple. In the past, our mind tends to dwell on memories of things that happened in the past, and those memories are either positive memories of things that went well and that we enjoyed, or negative memories. Now, the reality is the mind tends to get stuck on and hold onto memories of things that went wrong in the past. And when we consistently ruminate and think about, and it plays over our head, those errors or mistakes or failures we had, what that eventually does, it creates an experience in the present moment of, it reduces our confidence. We end up having doubt in that area or some insecurities in that area. And if we're carrying those low confidence, doubts, insecurity as a result of some failure in the past, it's just like moving forward with rocks in our backpack. And in order to move forwards through and beyond COVID times, we need to have our load as light as possible. So where can we start offloading some baggage from the past? What's happened in the past and has gone wrong needs to be left in the past. The only thing, only value of the past to us now is the lessons we can extract from those failures so we can apply them moving forwards. And we leave the experience and the emotions and the low confidence behind us. The other big rocks that we carry in our backpack from the past is regret, shame, or guilt. And this comes from when we know we did something wrong that we wish we hadn't have done. And when we hold on to that thing that we did that we don't feel good about, if we're constantly thinking about it, we will be carrying rocks that are labeled regret, shame, guilt, or something like that. The third place is when somebody wronged us. Somebody did something, they crossed us in the path, and what we do is, if we continue to hold on to that person and that experience of being wronged, we end up carrying some resentment, revenge, or something like that. None of these things serve us at all. They're just rocks in our backpack that hold us back from moving forward as fast as we can. So somehow to identify, every single one of us listening in here today has got some baggage we're carrying from the past. The ways to offload that is, there's a number of ways. Maybe it's to write a note and ceremoniously let go of it. Maybe it's to forgive the other person, or to forgive yourself, to genuinely forgive. Maybe write it down on a piece of paper and do some ceremonial burning of that experience, and then extract, so what is the lesson that I can feel grateful for having got through that unfortunate experience? The second place where our distractions happen, and that's around the future. And again, our minds, naturally as human beings, we tend to spend a lot of time dwelling in the future, thinking and anticipating things that might happen. And the mind goes to two places. It's either to chasing success, chasing our goals, wanting our achievements, or it goes towards things going wrong. And essentially, this gives rise, certainly in sport, to the two of the biggest mental obstacles to success in sport is fear and pressure. And I hazard a guess, to a fair degree in life, these are two of our biggest obstacles to success. Pressure and fear are both just mental concepts in our head that we create for ourselves. They are not real, they are concepts, and we create them. The more value we place on a result or an outcome, the more pressure we feel. The more fear we have of something going wrong, or the more we dwell on things going wrong, the more fear rises. We've probably had collectively and globally more fear in the global collective in the last 6 months than what we've possibly had in our living history, because we're constantly fed fear, doom and gloom stories about what might happen in the future, all the things that will go wrong, all the conspiracy theories. And the more I certainly fell foul of that the first 3 weeks of sort of when lockdown and COVID really hit in South Africa. I followed everything that the commentators of the day were saying, and I found myself getting very fearful, very anxious, quite depressed. And I realized I'd got into that state because I was allowing my mind to go to all of these places that people were talking about and all the things that might go wrong. As soon as I stopped and extracted myself from only thinking about the future and things going wrong, straight away it brought some equilibrium back into my life. So where might you be hankering after results that is creating unnecessary pressure? Particularly the perfectionists, take note here. We need to dial that down a bit. And if you're feeling anxious or fearful, it's probably because you're spending too much time reading, watching, or thinking about things going wrong in the future. We need to chase success. We need to look at what are the things that might go wrong, and both of those just get used to inform. So what do I need to do? Come back into the present moment, and what do I need to do today in order to set up the best chance of success and to potentially avert the failure that might happen? And if it comes along, what am I going to do about it? And finally, the last couple of minutes, I see the hour, we're coming to the top of the hour. The third place where we find mental obstacles to our success is in the present. And it's either having a wrong attitude to the present moment, it's resisting what is, it's complaining about, we don't agree with the way the government is managing these, we don't agree with the rules, or COVID shouldn't be coming along, or why did it happen? It's almost like making some plans for the weekend. We wake up and it's raining and we get all upset because it's raining. When we get upset about something that is outside of our control, we hand over control, we become disempowered, and it really pulls us down. So where things are out of our control, like COVID and like the decisions that higher powers are making and authorities are making, we need to have the right attitude towards that. And as I've spoken to today, some of the areas we can also create distractions to our success is, firstly, as I've spoken, you're having the wrong focus, getting stuck in negative memories of the past or stuck in the future. Many of us may well have developed some bad habits during the lockdown period. That's okay. But are we going to actively work to reverse and change those habits into good habits, or are we going to just remain stuck in some of the bad habits? Lack of planning, particularly around the kind of, as I said, the planning, the long-term planning we have control over is our actions and our decisions and the kind of character legacy that's going to leave behind. Not playing to our strengths is going to hold us back. Having values that are more self-serving and serving others or cause greater than ourselves, I think we'll find, as I said, slightly more shaky building blocks of a success. And really not being somewhere near our purpose, it's going to create a struggle. If we're trying to live somebody else's life or live through the eyes of somebody else, it's going to be quite difficult moving through what is already going to be a relatively difficult phase. So that's a wrap. Just a final poll before we move into questions, and it's not often that I get almost on time, 2 minutes over, so apologies for that. But just to pop in there, how could you improve your mental game? Just going very briefly through this map we navigated. Is it related to the past? Number one, maybe offloading some luggage. Relating to the future, in the second point, maybe putting less pressure on yourself, being less perfectionist, having slightly lower expectations. Is it the third point, stressing less about problems and things going wrong in the future that creates anxiety and stress? Maybe fine-tuning some of your current habits, or maybe there's something else that we didn't cover. Again, just to pick one area, and hopefully that, I know I just went through that very briefly in about 7 or 8 minutes, but hopefully there was a tiny piece of value in that for you. In the longer series that we do, we spend literally a whole week unpacking and helping each individual find very specific areas where we can remove some of those weeds from our vegetable garden or remove some of the obstacles to our success. Alrighty, so quite a array of answers there. Finding tune some current habits is the biggest one there, which is awesome because that's we just need to get over the mental side, but it's a behavioral adjustment, and already 7 of you have recognized, I'm sure, something we can do there to help us move forwards and beyond this experience. And at that, thank you very much. I'll give it back to you, Steyn and Dr. Wada.
Thank you very much, Paddy.
Well, thank you very much. Go ahead, Steyn.
No, thank you very much. It was absolutely fantastic. As a matter of fact, I actually wanted to interrupt and say, just carry on. You know, as you were talking, more people were actually joining. You know, so you could have casually just finished up. But yeah, thank you very much for that. I do have a question, and I also see that there's some questions from the participants. Doc, if you have a question, you can do the honors and maybe start off.
Well, that's not a question, but a bit of an observation about what you said, Paddy. I like the you know, and Steyn and I have been involved in a recent piece of work looking at values and how values also are actually embedded in purpose. and it's very interesting. I mean, the story, it's a very sad story actually. The one with the Australian captain, the cricket captain.
Yeah.
And it's very important because actually today it's not about only doing the right thing, but about actually intervening at the right time. And I think the captain is held accountable. There's a lot of work that we do at the moment, myself and someone that we're putting a book together on governance and leadership. And it's a question of accountability and taking accountability and ownership, right? And so in your experience, really, I mean, my real question here is, do you think that people who are put into positions of leadership, if that be a coach or a manager or do you think that they feel that sense of ownership and accountability for not only doing the right thing and directing people at the right time, but actually intervening when they see that kind of behavior? Because when we talk about values of an organization, a lot of companies, you walk around and you see values plastered all over the wall, right? And they've got
Yes.
But you don't have that. This Stein pointed out to me the other day. In your house, I don't have a set of values sort of typed up in a nice frame and stuck on the wall of my house, but my kids sort of understand our values, right? And they live
Yes.
they live mostly to those values. And when they don't, we do this sort of behavioral correctional kind of coaching and stuff like that. But that doesn't happen so much in organizations, in my experience. So in your experience, maybe in the sporting world or in the corporate world, how would you say that is, and how important is it? Because you said strengths, values, and purpose is really the foundation of your A game model.
So, I mean, as you say that, Doc, it is complicated when we start getting into the detail of it. So if I can use that Stephen Smith example to illustrate, to answer some of the questions. So when Stephen Smith, who was a young leader, a high potential leader, was given the role of captaincy with the Australian team, the team was already firmly on this path of questionable win at all costs type behavior that was firmly entrenched within the team. And the conversation, I did a lot of work in Australian cricket coaching for 4 years in the Australian Big Bash League. And the conversation we're having with some of the senior officials in Australian cricket was, is Stephen Smith courageous enough to change the direction of the ship to more line up with his personal leadership values? And if he's not courageous and strong enough, because he was really young and fairly junior in that team at the time with some very strong senior players leading the ship in one direction, is he going to get some leadership support to be able to redirect that he's actually got his hands on the wheel of this ship? And if he doesn't do that, this train, the language we actually use, is heading to hit a brick wall at some stage. And we don't know when, and we don't know what's going to cause it, but your young captain is going to be sitting in the driver's seat and he's going to bear the brunt when it happens. So nobody changes. So it's really in those difficult times that our values are really questioned. In buoyant times when things are going smoothly, it's very easy to sort of live values and they never really come into question. But it's those difficult moments, exactly like happened in that test match. Did Stephen Smith have the courage, number one, and the backing, number two, to step in and intervene with a much more senior player and say, no, that's not what we're going to do? But Stephen Smith didn't feel he was able to. So I think the big thing for me with enforcing a value in a very difficult situation like exactly happened there, the piece that really needs to tag on there is courage. And for leaders, we need to have massive courage to be able to step in and go, no, this is not right. Even if this is something and sometimes in some companies, there is a legacy of taking a bit of a backhander or making a bit of an arrangement that's sort of covered over because that's the way it's always been done. But I think that's going to be called into question a little bit more going forwards in post-COVID time. So
yeah, well,
for me, it's courage. enforcing the values.
Thank you. It's a good point that you make, because even in big corporate governance scandals, the whole it happens. It's all human nature, right? If you look at the Enron and read the reports around the Enron disaster and what happened there, it was the same kind of thing. In the groupthink that you get, and then people get used to a certain culture, and then the value actually shifts. I don't know if the value shifts or changes, or it becomes a lot more flexible. But there is a question from Kogmotso. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce that.
That's right.
Kogmotso, yeah. Have you found some habits to make the maximum impact on one's life and success than others?
Wow. Yes and no. So for me, it's very personal. I wouldn't say that there's too many generic habits that are applicable to everyone. I think this is a very personalized thing. But if I were pushed to say what are the general habits that maximize the impact, I would say probably the most important one is health. It's probably one of our greatest wealths. And you only need to, we can lose money, a car can get stolen, a house can get burnt down, somebody can get into and hack our computer systems, and we can always recover from it. But health is something that I would say is probably the most important, one of the most important, and possibly one of the most neglected assets, particularly for busy business professionals. We've spent too much time focusing on work. So that would be my one that I'd pick out of all of them. And certainly in the work that I've done in the corporate space, that's probably one of the biggest shortcomings that I come across. People are very intelligent, they're intellectual, they're thinking out the box, they're innovative, they're open to learning, they're ticking all those professional boxes, but the personal piece around health, and it's not just our physical health. I think that's really important, because once you lose that, you're of no value to too many people. But it's also looking after, particularly through this time, our mental health. Have you got the right balance? Are you getting enough time to refresh your brain and get away from work and experience? And the third thing is emotional health. Particularly for men, we struggle more with our emotional health than what females do. So are we attending to that well enough? And of course, the fourth piece that's completely personal is our spiritual health. But those four health aspects, if we got those in place, things tend to work pretty well.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's very, very important. Just one last question, and leading on from what you've said over there. You've spoken about, and you have obviously led and coached teams, and you've coached also individuals, and from your experience, it's been reflective, and you've obviously learned as much from them that they've learned from you, and it's been. But how different is it? How different is it when you are coaching teams than when you're coaching people? Because as managers, and leaders of organizations, they do coach teams and they have to coach people, and I find a lot of managers or leaders, basically decide to coach everyone in the same way. So how important it is. And then when you have such a diverse group of people, when you mentioned that you work with a diverse group of people, but in a leadership sense, what kind of advice can you give leaders about coaching teams versus coaching individuals?
Very, just before you answer that, I do need to just come in here very quickly with some housekeeping while you think of that answer. It's a very important question. But we have some of the participants that they are leaving. They have other engagement as well. So I just want to ask Marina just to put on the feedback form for us, and then there's also a download on the team smart team management update for you to download. So I just don't want participants to miss that. So my apologies for interrupting. Please go ahead, continue to answer the question. People can fill out the feedback form and download the brochure as well. Thank you. Please continue.
Thanks, Dave.
Cool. Thank you. Doc, it's interesting that as you're talking, I'm trying to just for me personally, get my head around coaching individuals versus coaching teams. And although I've done most of my coaching has been team coaching, I've never seen it as coaching a team. I've always looked at it as coaching individuals. And, you know, I was accused very early on. Someone said to me, you know, you're treating people differently. And it was an accusation. And I went like, yes. The idea of treating everybody the same is so old school, industrial era, yesterday leadership. We do need to be treating each individual as an individual in their own right. And in fact, it was interesting when Gary Kirsten and I coached the Indian team, and the teams that I've coached around the world are all teams made up of people from different nationalities and different ages and different levels of experience. So because of the diversity, I'm forced to really pay attention and listen, because I know I don't understand the people and their cultures. And when Gary Kirsten and I came back to South Africa and we started coaching the South African national cricket team, it was interesting that one of the conversations we had is we said our biggest difficulty and our biggest obstacle is going to be coming back into an environment where we actually know the people and the culture really well, and we might slip into the habit of not paying attention because we think we understand the people we're dealing with. And is it going to get us to get lazy in really seeking to understand the other? So we're coaching people, not teams, in my view.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Sorry, Stan, over to you, man.
No, it's all good. I mean, a very, very interesting view and a lot of food for thought. Right in the beginning of this evening, earlier on, we had a question from Yusuf. He asked, do you believe some leaders are more fear-based to shift to out-of-box thinking as it challenges their inner fears or presents exposure to their vulnerabilities? So I'm not sure whether Yusuf is still online. So it sounds as if he's alluding to, you know, the factor that fear plays in leaders making a decision. It was just after you told the story about, you know, the captain of the Australian cricket team not doing anything. If you could maybe respond to that first.
Yes. In the short space, to give a short answer, what comes to me is the continuum of pessimism to optimism, and the suggestion that as people, we've probably got a natural wiring to a certain area along that whole continuum from pessimism to optimism, and that people who wired more on the optimistic side of the scale would tend to be more fear-based because they would look at things going wrong. There's a natural tendency with pessimists is to look what goes wrong, where the more optimists would tend to look at things with rose-colored glasses and going right. So they would tend to be more risk takers. And again, I'm talking a generalization here. So I think it's useful, you know, in fact, I'm not sure who made the statement or had the saying, but I really liked it, where he said the optimists invented the aeroplane and the pessimists invented the parachute. So both of them are important. And sometimes the fear-based person, is it an unnatural fear that can actually be coached through? And sometimes we would have leaders who are naturally wired to be pretty pessimistic. Very often, you know, they sit in sort of, when we make the CFO, the CEO, we tend to have very quite fear-based leadership. Sorry, I'm probably stirring a little bit there, but we've seen that story enough times. So that's just my thinking, and it's maybe to look at what is the leader's natural wiring, and if they are naturally quite pessimistic, maybe you need to balance some of that leadership responsibilities with a personality who's prepared to be slightly more risk-taking, and to have the pessimist as a wingman of the optimist is probably the ideal combination.
Okay, well, Yusuf, thank you for that. Yusuf has responded, and he said thank you for the answer, and he also said stir on. Maybe a question I had right in the beginning, something that intrigued me is when you started to tell your own story, going to coach the team. There was clear wisdom that you applied right from the start. You know, your approach is different. You see the ones and the twos, not the fours and sixes. You get rid of all the coaches. You focus on the individual. You never, unless I missed it, you never kind of shared with us where that wisdom came from. I mean, like, myself, I'm in strategy and system thinking, so I can tell you, man, I follow Ackoff and I read Jacques Elliott. I love his work, and I'm a keen supporter of Peter Senge in terms of establishing learning organizations. So I can quote you the names, but I mean, where did your insight and wisdom come from? How did you know that you were supposed to do these things? Because the success that you achieved and the teams afterwards is just off the scale.
Yeah. So, I mean, thanks for that question, Steyn. So as you said in the beginning, I do have some academic foundation that does inform my thinking. But I would say probably what lined up really nicely was when I went through school and university and played in sports teams, I really didn't find it very effective when people told me what to do and use the authoritarian my way or the highway type approach. So, and then as we moved into the internet era, and the content or the wisdom that previously sat within yesterday's CEO, when I talk about yesterday's and saying up till, in the 20th century, CEOs got to that position because they were the content expert, they were the strategic brains, they knew more than anybody else. And when you reach a position because you know more than anybody else, yesterday's leadership was about telling people what to do, and followers are very happy to receive instruction from somebody who knew better. And that was very much the model in sport as well. Is the cleverest person became coach. They told everyone what to do, and everyone's job was just to be diligent little followers of instruction. And I guess for me, I innately really didn't like that way of operating. So I was constantly resisting that as a young man. And then when I went into studying and understanding why that didn't work for me, I certainly wasn't going to go and do that same thing to other people. And as I said, particularly in the internet era now, it's not possible for any one person to be the expert in anything. There's always somebody who knows better. And even if in the room somebody doesn't know better, if you don't have the answer, someone will be able to type the right question into Google quicker than me. So I'm just innate. It's sort of almost it's common sense in this day and age to know that experience might sit with some leaders, but when it comes to knowledge, that sits out there in the collective. And as leaders, I think our role then is to harness the intelligence that sits within the group. And if it's not in the group, as I said, somebody will know who to ask or what question to type into Google. And as a leader, for me personally, just a very brief little chuckle that I have with my close circle of friends who know that I don't know quite enough about cricket to be holding the position of head coach as I have over the last couple of years. And my friends say to me, so Paddy, realistically, so you have a really bad game and you've got to walk into the post-match debrief with players like Mike Hussey, Jacques Cullis, Shane Watson, Owen Morgan. These are some of the best brains in world cricket, all in my team. And they say to me, how do you actually lead a team meeting like that and tell guys like that what they did wrong when you're not actually qualified to do that? Isn't it quite threatening? And my answer is, actually, it's so not threatening, because I really don't feel as the leader that I need to walk into the room with the answers. I need to walk into the room with good questions and listening to allow the answer to emerge. So actually, as a leader, my approach is really freeing, and it lightens the load so much on us. It puts a bit more load on our followers, and some people still like to be told what to do because it absolves them of responsibility. But that's sort of a long answer. So it's a bit of academic experience and a bit of intuitive stuff. Hopefully what I say just makes sense.
No, it does. And it helps. I mean, I was one of the fortunate and lucky people that you remember you gave me your book, The Barefoot Coach. So, I mean, a lot of it comes out of that as well. But, I was always, curious as to, where the profound wisdom came from. And so certainly, just the ability to reflect on one's life and extract, what worked, what didn't work, and your way to change that in the game. I mean, the success speaks for itself. I don't have any further questions, and I don't think I haven't noticed any of the participants. Doc, if I could maybe ask you just, for some closing words, and then we can thank Paddy for a an absolutely awesome webinar. So over to you, Doc.
Yes. Yes. I mean, Paddy, thank you very, very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Honestly, it was very, very enjoyable to listen to you and really and sort of. I mean, I don't know much about cricket. I mean, I used to play cricket, when I was a kid, because I spent a few of my formative years in the UK. And we used to have these 3 sticks that we used to stick into the ground, and then we used to have this and we used to play with the tennis ball, not with the cricket ball. We always get worried with the cricket ball. It's too bloody hard. When it hits you, it really 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 hurts. That's why I used to remember. So I used to rather play with the tennis ball instead. But yeah, I didn't really quite understand fully the game, but I always found it fascinating, and very fascinating that in this part of the world, actually, especially with the Asians, cricket became very, very important. But one movie which was deeply moving for me, and one that I watched with my wife many years ago, was a movie which I'm sure you've watched. It was called Lagan. Yes, and it was a beautiful story about sort of social equality and how the game and cricket brought about this and with the competition and all, and it was really fantastic. So I'm sure that there's a lot that people could learn from the game and sort of the team dynamics in it. So I did enjoy that, although I don't know enough about cricket to understand all the words. But what I really found quite interesting is your A game model is really something that resonates with me a lot. I know it resonates with Steyn, because we recently, as I said, did a project and just built a leadership framework around purpose-driven organizations and now values, and then those values through the Connected Leadership platform spoke about looking at the values at individual, at team level, and at organization level, and how it sort of transcends all of that. So really fantastic. I did thoroughly enjoy that, and yeah, definitely looking forward to meet up with you in person. And yes, thanks very much. God bless you. And well done. Well done. Steyn?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So we would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We've been looking at the comments, the chat box, and it's been really very, very good. Again, this will be made available on the platform for the recording will be available on the platform for Connected Leadership, and people will be able to connect this. If you've got friends who have not been able to connect tonight, make sure that they are able to sort of get a copy of this recording. So anyway, with that, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us tonight. Paddy, once again, thank you very, very much. Fantastic. Steyn, thanks, and we should not forget Marina in the background, doing making sure making sure really that we're able to actually run these webinars. So God bless her as well. All right, okay, thanks very much, guys. Assalamu alaikum, take care. All right, and be safe wherever you are. Okay, all right.
Thank you, Paddy. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.